Hi, this is the African American Atheist, and today I want to discuss a topic that I coin as the religious trap, and basically why religions and beliefs of gods have persisted from the past to the present day, and how I view religion as a living entity in and of itself. So to jump right into this, I feel that religion serves the purpose of representing the strong controlling force, similar to our maternal and paternal figures we rely on and take comfort with during childhood. But this controlling force is normally not manifested through physical actions such as violence or abuse, but more importantly, the religious controlling force uses the emotions and thought processes of the believers, their spiritual conscience, and fear of God's potential punishment toward them. This manifestation and carrying out of this control is what I coin as a term called the religious trap. So the religious trap works as a defense mechanism to keep the religion alive and well. Just as the self-defense mechanism of a rose bush are the thorns which protect the rose bush from outside threats such as predators, the self-defense mechanism of religion are the very minds of the believers and their fear of a perceived consequence of going against God. And we all know that self-defense mechanisms are only developed as a response to a known weakness or fallibility, so to speak. So I guess therefore it can be, logically deduced a little bit that religion on the whole must have a known weakness and is indeed fallible. The defense mechanism, or religious trap as I call it, it works as follows. For example, we all know it's been proven that evolution, whether micro or macro, does indeed occur, and it accounts for the diversity of life on our planet. Because this evidence and proof of evolution occurring and still occurring is in direct conflict with the fundamentals of most religions, the defense mechanism is automatically activated in the mind of the religious follower. The result is that the believer of a God will be forced to assume that the scientific evidence have to have been misinterpreted, or it's flat out wrong, because it just can't be that man and the animals were not instantaneously created by God as described in whatever holy book you believe in. Even if the evidence is overwhelmingly pointing towards evolution and common descent, that's the framework that the religious trap, that defense mechanism, will instill within the believer. So by having this simple defense mechanism, religions have managed to stick around for thousands of years, because if something goes against the religion, the followers themselves bear the burden in defending it. And if not, their conscience will really make them feel bad about potentially betraying their faith, even if all they would be doing is accepting the truth, or accepting a new worldview, or accepting some new information. And that's a very powerful defense mechanism. So, I feel it could be deduced that the believers of a God have been conditioned into emotional and intellectual dependency on their religion and belief in a God. They're afraid to think for themselves, because first they would humbly have to acknowledge and admit that they are fallible, and more importantly, that religion and the concept of a God is fallible. The religious trap trains them to fear, and in some cases despise, the freedom of thought. So in a way, they become free of the burden of freedom, as strange as that sounds. They escape from this freedom in order to stay at peace with their religion, but at the same time, unknowingly, what they're basically doing is just running away from the anxiety associated with decision-making and decision-making skills. The atheist, on the other hand, has learned to live with this low-level anxiety of free thought and makes the most of it. So as an atheist, I rest upon the notion that the more that one learns about science and accurate depictions of reality, the better their decision-making skills become. And that in and of itself is a self-reinforcing cycle that explains, the draw and affinity of the atheist with science and knowledge. Right? The religious person, or the believer of a God, they escape from that burden of decision-making by believing in a God, simply because if a religious person makes a decision, even if that decision turns out to have grave consequences, ultimately, and from a philosophical point of view, it's still no concern to the religious person, because ultimately they know the consequences, no matter what they are, were obviously simply part of a God's plan all along. And remember, a God allegedly knows best, and with that, how can personal responsibility ever be divvied out for any decisions that you make when ultimately a God is in control? So it's that whole kind of nonsensical loop that really is the draw of religion, and makes the believer of a God very, very comfortable and very, very clingy to that very concept. It's the relieving of personal responsibility in their everyday life, because on a philosophical level, they know that they're not in control. So The religious trap, however, it doesn't only protect itself from scientific discovery, it also has the duty of protecting itself from other religions. So I see this all the time when religions don't want their young members or newer or weaker members, quote unquote, around other religions for fear that that young, naive, new believer may potentially get sucked into the other faith. So that trap, it works so efficiently that every religion actually has its members come to believe that they're in the one true religion. That, in and of itself, that kind of self-defense makes it seem like religion is some sort of, super-organism. And I really try to look at it that way. So when someone says a statement such as, my religion is the true way to get right with God, what they're really saying is that my religion has the best defense mechanism of them all, and it has brainwashed me to the extent that if I even contemplate betraying it or accepting some new information, my conscience will really make me feel bad. So when one objectively approaches religion from an outside view, it appears to have all the analogous attributes to any other successful living organism. And that's one of the things I always say. So with a living organism, all living organisms need a diet, right? What does it feed on? So I would say that religion feeds on and nourishes itself with the minds of the believers themselves. Every living organism needs a body or some sort of structure of some sort. The body of religion it consists of the billions of believers all working together as a superorganism for the common goal of carrying out the growth and reproduction of the religion itself. It's a one-to-one comparison, I feel. Every living entity needs some sort of defense, and we know that the religious trap, in a believer's point of view, it's automatically activated, and it dismisses anything that goes against the faith as wrong or betraying God, or even if it's the truth, that religious trap defense mechanism is automatically going to be activated. It's very efficient. Every living organism needs a reproductive mechanism. So just as every living creature needs a mode of reproduction, I feel that, the population of religious believers, it increases, it reproduces, just like with biological reproduction by either inheritance, where the children and any other family members automatically inherit the religious faith-based view on life from the early indoctrination from their parents or guardians. Or, religious concepts can spread or reproduce by what I would call some sort of outside exchange, where a person comes in contact with a persuasive individual of another faith. So it's almost mitosis versus meiosis of sorts for my fellow biology geeks out there. But, these two mechanisms of religious reproduction are strikingly similar to the mechanisms of biological reproduction. Those mechanisms being asexual reproduction, where the offspring are basically the exact result or copy of their parent, and sexual reproduction, where the offspring are the result of an exchange or recombining of information from two separate individuals. So I think it's a one-to-one comparison, and it needs to be talked about a little bit more. But when one looks at it like this, religion appears to be the perfect living thing. It has a good steady diet. It has a solid regenerative internal structure. It has not one, but two modes of replication. And above all, it has a near perfect defense mechanism. So religion itself would be the perfect living entity and benefit mankind if only if it was based on reality and real principles. So I firmly believe that the religious trap basically can lead to a type of psychosis, which should seriously be studied by modern psychology, because it's amazing how the religious trap can destroy a person's common sense to such an extreme that they'll readily choose to believe the unbelievable, and they'll readjust their life to fall in line with that. And that's the problem, right? So the religious trap has the power to take a normal human being. It instills a yearning for the fanciful so deep within them that even when faced with a mountain of evidence which clearly destroys the fantasy, the religionist will only tighten his or her grip on the fantasy. And it's that exact kind of feedback loop that makes the whole thing insane, and it makes it worthy of study from a psychology point of view. So again, this is the African American Atheist. Thank you for listening / watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you in the next video.